You've come here because something profound has awakened within you. Perhaps a restlessness you can't explain. Perhaps the feeling of carrying an invisible weight that no one sees but consumes your energy. Perhaps you heard the word empath and felt a connection, a mysterious resonance, as if these words spoke directly to your heart. But beware, what you're about to hear is not an invitation to comfort, nor a celebration of superficial niceness. It's a call to confront an ancient, dark, and powerful reality that hides beneath what the modern world calls feelings. The empathy you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies an abyss that few dare explore. An empath isn't simply someone who feels what others feel tenderly. The true empath is a psychic channel, a lightning rod through which the world's unconscious energies flow. This gift, however, can be a curse. Popularized empathy has been distilled, weakened, transformed into a light and superficial caricature, while its true essence remains deep and dark. An empath carries shadows that don't belong to them, absorbs pain that isn't theirs, and often doesn't even know it. They are vulnerable to the archetypal currents that flow unseen in the lives of others, ancestral forces, ancient patterns that shape the human psyche in its depths. Imagine an ancient healer, kneeling in a field during a fierce storm, vomiting blood not because his body is sick, but because the earth is sick. This is the empath, a transmuter who carries burdens he never asked for. And if he doesn't awaken to this role, he will be consumed by it. I saw in a dream a woman on a bridge without eyes, her hands outstretched, trembling between asking for help and pushing away what was coming from the abyss below. In the background, voices cried out, in desperation, longing, confusion. She felt them all like open wounds on her body. This woman is the image of the empath, blind to the source of her pain, unable to distinguish where the other ends and she begins. Being an empath is like being a psychic sponge, but no one taught you how to wring yourself out, how to cleanse what you absorb. And the unconscious, that chaotic and sacred force, has no moral compass. When you open your heart to another's suffering, consciously or unconsciously, you invite into yourself the dark matter of another's shadow, that rejected, unloved, feared side that many carry and let drift. There are ancient stories that warn us about this. A young African dreamer, who heard the nameless spirits in the forest, felt waves of terror and sadness that were not his own, and reacted by crying, trembling, and laughing without reason. The tribe feared he was possessed, but the elder didn't drive out the spirits. He taught him to name them, to dialogue with them. This is the lesson. An empath without discernment becomes a playground of rejected shadows. An empath who names their burden walks toward the alchemy of the soul. Empathy can be a subtle possession. The unconscious is a trickster that doesn't always reveal itself with horns and fire. Sometimes it comes disguised as overwhelming compassion that drowns you, an insatiable need to help that destroys your limits, or a love that confuses your body with the tomb of the other's pain. I've seen empaths fall in love with those who destroy them, not out of weakness, but because their own wounds have been seduced by the others. They become caregivers, saviors, silent sponges. But this is a dark union. The healer becomes the wounded, the light becomes shadow, and the soul is lost in the other's labyrinth. If you are an empath, know that your gift is psychic and archetypal. You perceive not only feelings, but also the lineage, the forgotten gods, the unlived lives that inhabit those who cross your path. If you haven't made contact with your own unconscious, if you haven't traversed the labyrinths of your deep self, you will be overwhelmed. Spirituality may romanticize this sensitivity, but the soul knows there is no gift without shadow, and empathy is an invitation for what is hidden to surface. When a person's repressed anger encounters an unconscious empath, it leaps like fire on dry wood, inflaming their body and mind, without them knowing the reason for their discomfort. I once saw a woman who wept incessantly upon entering the office, wordless, carrying the unweeping grief of her female lineage, an ancestral weight that made her a vessel for a pain that was not hers alone. Empaths, if they don't define their limits, will drown in other people's ghosts. The gift requires structure, the strength to contain the fire, or it will consume them. In a dream, A man walked through a cathedral of mirrors, seeing the faces of loved ones suffering, unsure which was his. He cried out for his identity, but the mirrors only reflected his pain. Such is the lost empath, who forgets himself in the pain of others. If you recognize yourself, ask yourself, what work have you done to know yourself? Not with empty words, but in the dark confrontation with yourself. Have you faced your shadow? Have you seen the parts of you that use empathy to feel needed, even sacred? Have you acknowledged the dark pleasure of being the only one who understands another's suffering? For empaths, also carry a shadow. Often helping others means avoiding self-discovery. Bearing the suffering of others is more comfortable than the silence of the self. Empathy is not salvation. It is a threshold to be crossed wisely. Learn the art of boundaries, not cold walls but membranes that discern. I feel you, but I do not become you. I see your wound, but I do not keep it within myself. I offer presence, not possession. This is the true goal, to witness without absorbing. The empath's greatest tragedy is to lose themselves in the suffering of others, to become invisible to themselves. This happens in relationships where one carries the other's emotions like an unpaid servant, in families where the sensitive child regulates all the tension, in professionals who confuse compassion with codependency. This state is archetypal possession. The ungrounded empath becomes a puppet of the wounded healer archetype, Chiron, who demands suffering as proof of worth. The empath believes they were born to suffer alongside others, to be a martyr, a distortion of the true healing process. Archetypes are ancient living forces that act on your behalf. When you feel a compulsion to help, exhaustion after entering a room, or euphoria at being needed, stop. It's not just your emotions, it's archetypal voices of the savior, martyr, mother, or seducer that can overwhelm you. Puppets don't individualize, they only perform. The empath must initiate sacred separation, not from love but from fusion, not from presence but from entanglement. It's facing the other's pain and saying, I won't abandon you, but I won't bleed for you. Sitting beside them, but not becoming an ocean of their suffering. Having a firm heart and spine. In a dream I saw an ancient forest with deep roots, a bottomless pit at its center, where empaths wept, trying to pull their shadows to the light. But the pit is endless, and their tears feed it, the price of compulsive empathy, which feeds what yearns to be healed. Not every soul wants healing. Not all suffering seeks solace. Empaths who mistake gift for obligation spend their lives trying to save those who don't want to be saved, and sink with them. Ask yourself, does your empathy liberate or imprison? Does it honor the other's path or violate it with control? Has care become currency? Has sensitivity become power? Reflect. Where has your gift become a mask? Where have you confused connection with obligation? Where has it become essential to avoid loneliness? This is integration. True empathy doesn't absorb pain, but bears witness without losing its center. It is in the fire of another's suffering, but remains whole, not through detachment but through rootedness in the self. This self is totality, light and shadow, instinct and history, present and future, grounded. The empath becomes a source of compassion, not sacrifice, but strength. The path requires encountering the parts that love being needed, that fear abandonment to the point of fusion, that confuse intimacy with possession. Survival strategies born of profound pain. Once we understand the depth and weight that the empath's gift carries, it's crucial to recognize that this journey cannot be undertaken without awareness. The empath, without the light of self-knowledge, is constantly at the mercy of forces beyond their control, ancestral, emotional, and energetic forces that intertwine within and without them, shaping their experience without their awareness. A lack of this awareness opens the door to burnout, loss of identity, and often profound suffering. Being an empath is more than a gift or heightened sensitivity. It's a call to inner alchemy. This means learning to distinguish what's yours from what belongs to others, understanding the limits of your body and soul, and above all, developing a loving vigilance over your own emotions and energies. This vigilance isn't a cold armor that blocks out the world, but a living system that filters what should be embraced and what should be returned to the universe. Without this framework, empaths can become lost in the mazes of projection and emotional absorption. They can mistake their compassion for codependency, their desire to help for a trap for their own suffering. The line between genuine care and self-effacement is thin, and many empaths walk this dangerous tightrope without support or guidance. Imagine for a moment being in a room where all the emotions, pain, anxieties, and shadows of the people around you crash into you like uncontrollable waves. Without a solid anchor, these waves drag you away from yourself, dilute you, and make you forget who you are. It's like being a rudderless ship, lost in a stormy sea. Therefore, the empath must build their own rudder, a deep connection with their inner self that allows them to navigate these turbulent waters with confidence and wisdom. This construction begins with awareness of your own body and mind, listening to the messages they send, respecting your limits, and caring for your own energy as if it were a precious treasure. Without this, there's no way to support the weight you carry, nor to protect your soul from the shadows it tries to transmute. Self-care isn't selfish, it's survival. Another fundamental step is learning to say no, not to others with hostility, but to the universe with loving firmness. Knowing when to withdraw, when to be silent, when to retreat to restore oneself. The empath is not an infinite tank of energy. They need to constantly recharge to continue serving as a channel without losing their way. And there's also the need for honest and courageous internal dialogue. The empath must face not only the external shadows they absorb but also their own. It's necessary to delve into personal darkness to bring to light what hasn't yet been integrated. It's necessary to face one's own fears, wounds, desires, and limitations. It's hard work but essential to prevent the empath from becoming a victim of the archetypes that inhabit them. You may think this is too much, too heavy a burden to carry, but this journey doesn't have to be a solitary one. There are paths, techniques, and practices that help develop this awareness and inner strength. Meditation, reflective writing, therapy, connecting with nature, all are powerful tools for empaths to learn to contain, transmute, and above all, respect their sensitivity. Here, in this space, we want to walk this path with you. If this message resonates with you, if what is being revealed resonates with your soul, I invite you to subscribe to the channel so we can continue this journey together. Subscribe to receive more content that will illuminate the empath's path, bringing clarity, tools, and profound reflections that strengthen the soul and expand consciousness. Remember, empaths don't need to carry the world on their shoulders, but they can become beacons of light that illuminate themselves and others with balance and wisdom. By learning to protect and understand yourself, you open space for your true strength to manifest, the kind that doesn't get lost in the pain of others, but transforms pain into learning, sensitivity into power. Stay with us, because the empath's journey is challenging, intense, but also full of beauty and growth. You are not alone. Every step taken with awareness is a step toward your true freedom and the full manifestation of your gift. On the empath's path, one of the biggest traps is confusing their compassion and gift with a responsibility that doesn't belong to them. It's a responsibility the soul carries, often from childhood, like an invisible inheritance. The empath sees themselves as a savior, a healer, someone who must always be available, always present, always absorbing the suffering of others, so they don't have to face their own shadows. But this stance, however noble it may seem, is a silent invitation to self-loss. By assuming this responsibility, the empath plunges into a vicious cycle where caring for others becomes an escape from themselves. They begin to dissolve into the stories of others, forgetting their own pain and needs. Empathy, which should be a bridge to connection, becomes a prison, where the empath is held hostage by the emotions they carry. And ironically, the more they give without limits, the more empty and exhausted they feel, as if sailing on an endless sea, never finding solid ground. This is where the need for discernment becomes urgent. Discernment doesn't mean closing your heart or becoming indifferent. It means creating a sacred space within yourself, a territory where the empath can clearly distinguish what is theirs from what is the other's. It means learning to say, with love and firmness, I feel your pain, but it's not mine to carry. This isn't an act of selfishness, but of respect for one's own soul. It's the gesture of someone who knows they can only offer their best when they are whole, not broken. This art of discernment requires practice and courage. You need to pay attention to the subtle signals your body and mind send, that feeling of fatigue that won't go away, the irritability that arises for no apparent reason, the sadness that weighs on your chest even when everything seems fine. These are warnings from your being telling you that you're taking in more than you can process. Ignoring these signals is like walking on the edge of a cliff without looking down. Building healthy boundaries is the tool that shapes this discernment. Boundaries that aren't cold walls of defense, but porous membranes that protect while simultaneously allowing conscious flow. Boundaries that say yes to self-care and no to unbridled sacrifice. These are the boundaries that allow empaths to position themselves in the world authentically, without losing their essence, without diluting themselves. And for these boundaries to be effective, it's essential that they be supported by deep inner work. Empaths need to acknowledge their own shadows, their unhealed wounds, their fears, and their resistance. They need to delve into their own psyche, confronting the archetypes that inhabit them, those ancestral patterns that unconsciously influence their emotions and behaviors. Without this inner journey, boundaries become fragile, easily breached, and the cycle of absorption and exhaustion repeats itself. The empath's journey, therefore, is also a journey of self-discovery and profound transformation. It's about learning to be your own guardian, recognizing when to step away to protect yourself and when to reach out to connect. It's about balancing giving and receiving, feeling and observing, caring for others, and caring for yourself. This balance doesn't come overnight. It's a continuous process of trial, error, learning, and adjustment. It's normal to feel guilty or afraid when setting boundaries, especially if you grew up believing your worth lies in being indispensable to others. But it's precisely in this movement of breaking old beliefs that empaths find true freedom. And this freedom is a gift not only for you, but for everyone you meet. Because a balanced and conscious empath not only protects their own soul, but also offers the world an example of true presence, of mature and compassionate love that doesn't get lost in the drama of others. It is this presence that transforms relationships, that heals without hurting, that welcomes without suffocating. It is the silent force that illuminates without burning, that guides without dominating, that loves without losing itself. Being this empath means embracing the power of your sensitivity, not as a burden, but as an inexhaustible source of wisdom and connection. On this path, each conscious step is an act of courage and self-love, because learning to care for yourself is the first step to truly caring for others, without losing yourself. It's the subtle alchemy that transforms suffering into light, heaviness into lightness, chaos into harmony. The journey of the conscious empath is an invitation for you who feel this inner flame to awaken to your true nature, not as a victim of others' emotions, but as a wise guardian of your own sacred space. As you begin to understand the depth and complexity of the empath's gift, you realize there's an essential leap to be made from unconscious empathy to conscious empathy. This evolution isn't just a change in behavior, it's a transformation of the very essence of being an empath. Conscious empathy is an act of presence that transcends simply feeling what another feels. It's the ability to be with another person's pain, suffering, and joy, without losing your own integrity, without dissolving into the emotional sea that surrounds you. Being a conscious empath means learning to be a delicate and attentive observer. You begin to perceive the energies and emotions that surround you, but with a new quality of perception, one that distinguishes, separates, welcomes, and returns. It's not about closing your heart or becoming indifferent. It's about establishing a sacred space within yourself where what is yours remains with you, and what belongs to others does not invade your soul. This practice demands discipline, self-awareness, and above all, self-love. When the empath is unconscious, They are like a broken vase trying to carry too much water, overflowing, allowing themselves to be flooded, and eventually emptying completely. But the conscious empath learns to care for their own vase, reinforcing its walls, repairing cracks, and respecting the amount of water they can carry without bursting. This care is essential for the gift of empathy to remain a source of strength and not a source of exhaustion. To cultivate this conscious presence, empaths need to invest in practices that anchor them in the here and now, in their own inner reality. Meditation, silence, contact with nature, artistic expression, or even the simple act of breathing deeply are powerful tools. They help disconnect from the invisible currents that pull them out of themselves, offering a firm anchor so they can navigate other people's emotions without getting lost. Another fundamental aspect is recognizing one's own limits. The conscious empath knows that their emotional and energetic resources are finite, and that they must be respected with compassion. They learn to say no without guilt or fear, understanding that protecting oneself is not selfish, but an act of love that benefits everyone. This no is an act of courage and integrity, a gesture that establishes healthy boundaries and allows the empath to maintain their life force. The conscious empath's relationships reflect this maturity. They no longer lose themselves in codependent or toxic relationships, where giving is one-sided and exhausting. Instead, they seek connections that respect each person's individuality, relationships based on reciprocity, honesty, and mutual growth. Conscious empathy creates a space where love can flourish without imprisonment, where care is shared and where the other person's presence is a gift, not a burden. Of course, the path to conscious empathy is fraught with challenges. There will still be times when deep compassion feels like an irresistible call to surrender to another's suffering. There will be occasions when the empath feels the urge to save, to carry, to resolve ancient impulses rooted in the shadow of the soul. But it is in these moments that consciousness must act, remembering that true help begins within, with the maintenance of one's own integrity. This remembrance of one's own strength and center acts as a shield and a light. It prevents the empath from drowning in the suffering of others and guides them toward the practice of true compassion, the kind that accompanies without dominating, that listens without suffocating, that loves without losing oneself. It is compassion that respects the other's process, even when that process involves pain and resistance, knowing that suffering is an inevitable part of transformation. When the empath embraces this stance, they are no longer a sponge for the world, but a beacon illuminating the path for themselves and others. Their presence becomes a stabilizing force, an energy that welcomes and protects, strengthens and inspires. It is the place where pain finds a space to be seen and felt, but not to dominate or destroy. If this path is beginning to reveal itself to you, and if what I share resonates with your soul, I invite you to recognize the importance of spreading this wisdom. Like this video as a symbolic gesture of your commitment to your journey, and to the journey of all empaths seeking balance and healing. By liking it, you help amplify this message, allowing more people to discover this life-changing knowledge. Conscious empathy is the key to transforming a gift that could be a burden into an inexhaustible source of wisdom, connection, and true love. And by following this path, you are building a solid foundation for your soul, a foundation from which you can walk with firmness, serenity, and authenticity. This is an invitation for you to continue moving forward, learning to protect, respect, and love yourself deeply. Only then will it be possible to experience empathy, not as suffering, but as a celebration of your humanity and the humanity of others. Be the beacon the world so desperately needs, shining the light of balance and conscious love. The depth of the empath's experience lies not only in their ability to intensely feel the emotions of others, but also in the complex relationship they maintain with their own inner shadows. The shadow, this fundamental concept in Jungian psychology, represents the place where all the repressed, rejected, or denied parts of our being reside. The emotions we don't want to acknowledge, the desires we deem unacceptable, the aspects of our personality we try to hide even from ourselves. For the empath, the shadow takes on an even more complex and profound dimension. as they not only deal with their own shadow but often carry the shadows of others, making their inner journey much more challenging and intense. When empaths remain unaware of these dynamics, they risk becoming lost in the tangle of these shadows, confusing their own pain with that transferred by others around them. Without consciously confronting and integrating their own shadow, they become vulnerable to becoming a receptacle for unprocessed suffering, both their own and that of those around them. This confusion generates a constant state of anxiety, deep sadness, irritability, confusion, or even a diffuse feeling of helplessness and exhaustion. In this condition, the empath experiences not only their own internal struggle, but also a complex web of external pain that they absorb without proper discernment. Confronting the shadow, therefore, is a vital step for the empath who wishes not only to survive this overload, but to flourish in their entirety. It is a call to courageously look within and acknowledge what has been silenced, rejected, or hidden throughout life. This journey is far from simple. It requires vulnerability, humility, and a profound willingness to face uncomfortable truths that we would often prefer to avoid. However, it is also the path to true emotional and spiritual freedom, for only what is known can be transformed. Integrating the shadow means allowing these hidden parts to be seen, felt, and understood, rather than forever denied or repressed. For the empath, this process can manifest as the recognition and acceptance of one's own limits, fears, resentments, and even anger, emotions that are often rejected or considered incompatible with the idealized image of the empath as someone always compassionate, altruistic, and willing to carry the weight of the world. Acknowledging the shadow means accepting that it is not necessary to be perfect, nor to always be available to the suffering of others. That vulnerability and self-care are essential parts of balance. This acceptance opens the way for healing and empowerment for the empath. By embracing their own shadows, they gain autonomy over their emotional and psychic life. They cease to be a passive victim of external emotional currents and become an active agent of their internal balance. The empath learns to distinguish their inner voice from the cacophony of emotions surrounding them, finding a solid center within themselves. This center becomes the anchoring point for their stability and clarity in the face of the emotional storms they experience. This process requires a lot of patience and self-love. It's important to recognize that the shadow isn't an enemy, but an essential part of being human. It often holds vital energy that has been repressed by fear, shame, or social conditioning. Embracing it brings light to what was hidden, transforming darkness into strength and wisdom. By allowing these forgotten parts to gain space in the conscious, the empath expands their capacity for love, compassion, and authenticity. Furthermore, the integrated shadow profoundly transforms the empath's relationship with the outside world. With less fear and guilt, they can establish clear and healthier boundaries, avoiding getting lost in codependent or draining relationships that drain their energy. Their empathy becomes more authentic and less reactive, because they are no longer trying to fill emotional voids or heal wounds that don't belong to them. They begin to act with presence and awareness, offering genuine care without losing their inner balance. Another fundamental aspect of this integration is that it allows the empath to recognize and undo emotional patterns inherited from their family, social, or cultural lineage. Empaths often carry not only personal pain, but also ancestral pain, shadows that span generations and manifest as unresolved traumas, limiting beliefs, deep fears, or repetitive behaviors. Shadow work, therefore, is also a process of liberation from these invisible chains that prevent the empath from living fully and authentically. This process of awareness and liberation can be profoundly transformative, but also painful. It requires courage to face our own wounds and the patterns we so desperately try to avoid. But it is also a unique opportunity for empaths to become true alchemists of the soul. By transmuting their shadows into wisdom, they transform their gift into a creative, healing, and enlightening force. They cease to be a hostage to the pain of others and become agents of light, illuminating their own path, and consequently, the paths of those who cross their path. The empath who faces their shadow with courage, love, and patience reaches a new dimension of freedom. They become capable of loving without fear, of feeling without losing themselves, of being present without carrying the world on their shoulders. Their sensitivity becomes a channel for deep and authentic connection, no longer a burden too heavy to bear. This freedom is not a static state, but a daily practice of care, respect, and presence with themselves and others. This journey requires the empath to learn to value their own time and space, recognizing the importance of silence and solitude for renewing their energy. The conscious empath's journey inevitably involves mastering energetic boundaries, that vital skill that ensures the preservation of one's essence in the face of the vast and often turbulent emotional field that surrounds one. Contrary to what many imagine, this boundary is not a rigid wall that separates and isolates, but rather a delicate and permeable membrane that regulates what can enter and what must be repelled. It is the subtle and powerful art of establishing limits that protect without closing, that allow connection without fusion, that maintains the balance between feeling the other and preserving oneself. Many empaths experience a silent and ongoing drama, the feeling of constant invasion by external energies, as if they were psychic sponges absorbing everything around them, without filters, without defense. This emotional overload generates deep and persistent wear and tear, causing physical, mental, and spiritual exhaustion. It's common for the unconscious empath to experience episodes of what we might call empathic collapse, moments when they completely lose touch with themselves, becoming hostage to the emotions of others, in a kind of internal shipwreck. Therefore, learning to recognize and respect one's own energetic limits is a sine qua non condition for empaths to exercise their gift without becoming exhausted. This learning begins with paying close attention to the body, which is a true map and a reliable sensor. Unexplained tension, sudden fatigue, irritability that arises out of nowhere, diffuse feelings of malaise or anxiety, are signs that one's internal boundaries are fragile or broken. Ignoring these signs is like walking a tightrope without a safety net, risking falling into the abyss of emotional exhaustion. The practice of energetic protection, often neglected or even unknown to empaths, becomes a daily and fundamental necessity. Seemingly simple techniques, such as visualizing a protective light surrounding the body, conscious breathing exercises to ground oneself in the present, and the use of crystals, herbs, or sounds that raise vibrational frequency, are not mere magical rituals. They are manifestations of the inner power that each empath carries, which can be activated through firm intention and constant discipline. More than that, energetic protection involves the development of deep emotional awareness. The empath needs to learn to identify which emotions are genuinely their own and which are imported from other people or the environment. This distinction is delicate, as other people's emotions arrive disguised, mixing with their own, confusing and overwhelming. But it is precisely this ability to discern that allows the empath to maintain their clarity and authenticity, avoiding the confusion that leads to loss of center. The empath's vulnerability, far from being a weakness, is an invitation to deepen self-knowledge and self-compassion. This extreme sensitivity is often accompanied by a harsh inner critic, imposing harsh judgments, and a constant feeling of inadequacy. The mistaken belief that being vulnerable is weak fuels guilt and shame, making the empath's experience even more difficult. Deconstructing these limiting beliefs and cultivating a compassionate perspective on oneself is therefore an essential step in building inner strength. Furthermore, the conscious empath learns the importance of switching off or disconnecting energetically when necessary. This skill doesn't mean isolating oneself from the world or avoiding relationships, but rather knowing when to retreat to preserve one's physical, mental, and spiritual integrity. Like a wise warrior who knows exactly when to advance or retreat, the empath learns to navigate complex emotional dynamics with wisdom and balance, avoiding unnecessary exhaustion and keeping their essence intact. The balance between openness and protection is key to the sustainability of the empathic gift. Without this harmony, the empath becomes a victim of their own emotions, unable to maintain health in all its dimensions. With this awareness, on the other hand, their sensitivity transforms into a powerful tool for genuine connection, healing, and personal and collective growth. The empath becomes a channel of light, but one who knows when to close themselves off to preserve the inner flame. It's important to emphasize that this construction of energetic boundaries is not a one-off or definitive act, but an ongoing and dynamic process. An empath's boundaries are not static. They adjust, expand, and contract as their needs, experiences, and levels of consciousness evolve. It's a living process that requires constant vigilance, flexibility, and self-love, as the emotional world is fluid, unpredictable, and ever-changing. In this way, the conscious empath walks the world no longer as a passive and vulnerable receiver, but as an active guardian of their energy and soul. They embrace and transform the pain of others without losing themselves, balancing between giving and receiving, between feeling deeply and remaining whole. It is this delicate dance that makes the empath a unique being, capable of radiating light and love, even amidst the emotional storms they encounter. This ability to remain whole, steadfast, and present in the face of emotional chaos is what differentiates the mature, empowered, and conscious empath from one who still struggles to survive the weight of their gift. The path of the conscious empath also involves an often overlooked or deeply misunderstood aspect: the transformative power of silence and non-reactive presence. Amidst the emotional turmoil that surrounds them, intense emotions, others' pain, invisible cries, the empath learns that not all pain needs to be immediately resolved, nor should all anguish trigger an automatic response or an urgent need to act, fix, or control. There is an ancient, almost sacred wisdom in the simple act of being, of remaining present without interfering, of allowing emotions to flow and manifest without the compulsion to tame them. This active and conscious silence is paradoxically one of the most powerful forms of care for others, and above all, for oneself. When empaths allow themselves this space of inner silence, they create a field of safety and rest, where energy can stabilize, and where emotions, both their own and others, can be embraced without the rush of reaction. This delicate pause is an invitation for the other to also find their own healing rhythm, their unique and personal time to face their shadows, fears, and pain. This silent presence, devoid of judgment, expectations, or anxieties, is a profound act of love that respects the autonomy and uniqueness of each person's journey. It's common for empaths to feel pressure, whether internal, fueled by their own desire to help, or external, stemming from social or family expectations, to be the immediate solution, the constant comfort, the indestructible safe haven. This pressure can be incredibly draining, as the empath ends up forgetting their own needs and limits for the sake of others. Conscious silence then emerges as an indispensable tool for breaking this destructive cycle. It allows the empath to reconnect with their own center, restoring their energy and strengthening their capacity for genuine and sustainable empathy. Furthermore, this practice teaches the empath to cultivate the space between external stimuli and their emotional response. In this tenuous interval lies true freedom, the ability to choose how to act rather than react impulsively. Instead of being swept away by the emotional waves of others, the conscious empath learns to take a deep breath, pause, and act with wisdom and balance. This conscious choice prevents them from getting lost in other people's dramas, allowing them to preserve their emotional and psychological integrity. Naturally, this process requires a great deal of patience, discipline, and practice. The empath's natural tendency, fueled by their heightened sensitivity, is to respond immediately to another's suffering, attempting to alleviate pain, resolve problems, and heal wounds. However, by cultivating silence and presence, they discover that not all pain needs to be carried by them, nor should every problem be solved at their expense. Sometimes, the greatest gift they can offer is simply being there, fully present, unhurried, without expectations, simply welcoming. This stance profoundly transforms the empath's interpersonal relationships. Instead of engaging in emotional conflicts or draining dramas, they position themselves as a loving and present observer, acknowledging the other person's pain without being consumed by it. This creates breathing space and authenticity for both. allowing the relationship to develop in a healthier, more balanced, and truer way. This relational maturity is one of the most valuable fruits of conscious empathy. By adopting this stance, the empath becomes a mirror for the other, not one that simply reflects wounds and limitations, but one that reveals strength, potential, and the capacity for overcoming. They offer a silent and powerful invitation for the other to find their own path to healing, without invasive interventions, without pressure to be different, simply respecting their unique and sacred process. It's important to emphasize that this state of conscious presence does not equate to isolation or emotional detachment. On the contrary, it is a deep, genuine, and sensitive engagement, but one that occurs within clear and healthy boundaries. The empath learns to love and support without self-denial, to connect without losing their identity, to be supportive without self-sacrifice. This emotional maturity allows their empathy to be a true act of service and not a source of constant suffering. As empaths advance on their journey of self-knowledge and mastery over their own energy field, they encounter an even deeper dimension of their experience, the urgent and vital need to cultivate balance between giving and receiving. This harmony, sometimes underestimated, is not merely a practical or superficial matter, but a delicate and essential dance for sustaining their emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual health. For the empath, whose nature is naturally inclined to give intensely, the true challenge lies in learning to receive, to allow life, people, and the universe to also nourish their soul with care, support, love, and genuine recognition. The imbalance between giving and receiving is one of the most common and profound sources of burnout, suffering, and disconnection faced by empaths. They often find themselves in the position of the incessant caretaker, someone who puts the needs, pain, and expectations of others above their own, sacrificing their own well-being and boundaries in the name of compassion, love, and a sense of responsibility. This dynamic, while seemingly altruistic and generous, can become a painful trap, where the empath loses connection with their own life force and identity, becoming a fragmented, depleted, and even resentful version of themselves. Cultivating the balance between giving and receiving then emerges as a revolutionary and liberating act for the empath. It means learning to say yes to oneself with the same generosity and love with which one says yes to others. It means recognizing that one's energy, time, limits, and health are precious resources that deserve to be protected, honored, and valued. This deep awareness opens space for one to allow oneself to receive, not just help or practical support, but also affection, recognition, moments of pause, rest, and pleasure. This permission is an act of self-love and respect for life, for only with renewed energy can the empath continue to exercise their gift authentically and sustainably. Receiving with gratitude is also a way of honoring one's own existence and the life that pulses within. For empaths, who have often been conditioned by cultural, family, or personal beliefs to believe that their value lies in giving without limits, this practice can awaken uncomfortable feelings such as guilt, insecurity, or fear of appearing selfish or neglectful. However, it is essential to understand that the act of receiving does not diminish one's generosity or commitment to others. On the contrary, it enhances it, because it is in fullness and balance that giving becomes sustainable, profound, and true. This balance between giving and receiving also manifests itself in the quality and nature of the empath's interpersonal relationships. When they learn to set clear boundaries and cultivate the capacity to receive, they attract healthier, more harmonious and balanced connections into their lives, relationships where there is genuine exchange, mutual respect, recognition, and reciprocal care. These connections don't drain their energy, but rather renew it. They don't trap them in exhausting roles but invite them to be whole, authentic, and vulnerable. These are relationships that welcome their needs and uniqueness, while they welcome the other person's. Furthermore, the conscious empath recognizes that the balance between giving and receiving is a two-way street that also includes the relationship with oneself. Taking care of one's physical, emotional, and spiritual health becomes a sacred and essential act so that one can continue their mission in the world with vitality and integrity. As the empath advances on the path of conscious empathy, they encounter an increasingly profound and complex dimension of their experience. The connection with the archetypal and symbolic world that inhabits the collective unconscious, this vast reservoir of images, myths, and ancestral patterns that shape not only the individual psyche but humanity as a whole. This relationship with the collective unconscious is not merely theoretical or distant. For the empath who possesses a heightened sensitivity and an open channel to these subtle energies, this connection manifests vividly and intensely, bringing both gifts and profound challenges. Archetypes emerge for the empath as powerful, multifaceted figures representing universal aspects of the human experience. The wounded healer, the lone warrior, the sage, the mother, the trickster, the shadow, each carrying an energy that can act as a guide, an obstacle, or a mirror of the soul. These symbols are not merely abstract metaphors. They are living forces operating within the psyche, influencing thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and crying out to be recognized, understood, and integrated. Empaths, by their nature, feel these archetypes particularly intensely. Dreams, visions, intuitions, and synchronicities become part of their daily lives, offering powerful messages that challenge and illuminate their path. Often these phenomena bring recurring themes, figures that appear repeatedly, emotions that emerge without clear explanation, meaningful coincidences that seem to speak directly to the soul. It is in this symbolic realm that empaths can find valuable clues about their inner dilemmas, their blocks, and their deepest potentialities. However, this openness to the archetypal world also carries risks. Without preparation and awareness, empaths can become lost in fantasies, projections, or emotional exaggerations that distort their perception of reality and fuel confusion and suffering. The line between true sensitivity and psychic overload can be tenuous, requiring the empath to strike a delicate balance between receptiveness to messages from the unconscious and keeping their feet firmly planted in concrete reality. Maintaining this balance requires constant practices of anchoring, self-knowledge, and discernment. Empaths need to learn to listen to their inner voices without being swept away by them, to engage with their own internal symbols with respect and curiosity, but also with a critical and rational eye that prevents the symbolic world from becoming an inescapable labyrinth. This balanced approach is essential for contact with the collective unconscious to become a source of growth, rather than a trap of confusion and loss of control. By integrating these archetypal forces, the empath broadens their vision of themselves and their place in the world. They realize that their sensitivity is not a weakness or an isolated condition, but an ancestral gift that connects them to the web of life, to the soul of the world, to the invisible fabric that unites all beings. We now reach the culmination of this journey, where everything that has been explored, the shadows, the limits, the silent presence, the balance between giving and receiving, the connection with the archetypes, converges to reveal the deepest truth about the empath. Their true strength lies not in absorbing the suffering of the world, but in becoming a conscious, whole, and autonomous beacon, capable of radiating light without extinguishing themselves, of loving without being nullified, of feeling deeply without losing themselves. Being an empath isn't a burden to be carried, nor a vulnerability to be hidden. It's a call to courage, wisdom, and self-love. It's taking responsibility for caring not only for others, but above all for oneself, understanding that one's integrity is the fertile soil where true empathy can flourish. When empaths become aware of this dynamic, they transcend the role of victim of others' emotions and become active agents of transformation, not only of their own life, but of the collective. This transformation is a delicate and profound alchemy. It requires the empath to look themselves in the eye, recognize their shadows, and integrate them with compassion, to establish boundaries with firmness and tenderness, to practice silence and presence with humility, to learn to receive with gratitude and give with balanced generosity, to listen to and interpret the archetypal voices, without losing connection with the here and now. It is a continuous process of individuation, where the essence of the being reveals itself increasingly clear, firm, and luminous. And it is precisely this journey that you, the one watching this video, have been invited to begin or deepen. You who have felt something resonate in your heart, who have recognized challenges and gifts, who may have felt lost or overwhelmed by your own sensitivity, know that this path is possible, that you are not alone, that within you lies an immense strength, a light that already shines, even if it sometimes seems shy or hidden. Now more than ever is the time to embrace your place as the conscious and empowered empath you were born to be, to cultivate your emotional autonomy, honor your rhythm, respect your limits, and celebrate your unique ability to connect deeply with the world without losing yourself. You have the right and the duty to live a full, balanced, and authentic life, where your gift manifests as a source of well-being, growth, and love. And to continue this journey with more support, inspiration, and knowledge, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. Here we'll continue exploring the mysteries of deep psychology, conscious empathy, and transformative self-knowledge together. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any reflections, techniques, or insights that can help you strengthen your inner light and navigate the world with greater serenity and power. If this content touched your heart, please leave a like so more people can encounter these words and this healing energy. Your support is essential for this message to reach those who need it most, and for this community of conscious empaths to grow and flourish.